Hello again. Prime Minister, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's an honor to host this conversation. And I understand from what we just saw that we have a reminder how it's important still to meet in person and physically, because this is not the deepfake version, but the real version. So this is authoritative.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I was told earlier that before coming here, you would pass by Camp Kościuszko, the advanced NATO or American base here in Poland, which I think is quite an important symbol of our changing world. You were in Washington very recently at the Atlantic Council. There was this one phrase in what you said that I thought was particularly important. You said Poland is the one country that's both pro-American and pro-European, and therefore it has a special role, especially as a regional leader in a world that's changing fast and very dramatically. So can we just start by you setting out what you see Poland's role in the changing world to be?
I see in particular that Poland can be a keystone for transatlantic unity. This unity which is a little bit weakened for different reasons. I don't want to dwell into details, but what the free world needs right now, it's strong transatlantic unity and cooperation. And Poland is both pro-American and pro-European, and it's a good keystone, good interconnector, let's call it like this, between the two major pillars of the global stability, free trade and also security.
Can we dig a little bit into this? Because you are stating this because it seems to be that you are worried that this transatlantic unity is maybe fraying, maybe being undermined, maybe not as solid as it should be. What are you worried about?
Well, in particular with the recent changes when the operational model of some of the Western European countries was a little bit under threat. And the model is, cheap energy from Russia, a high margin product sold to China, cheap labor force from Central Europe, no longer there because the disposable income is growing, and security for free from the United States because many countries of the Western Europe do not pay their fair share for security, for defense. This model is kind of in the middle of nowhere, and some countries look at China and the other regions in the world to kind of reshape global landscape, whereas I think that the only hope for stability and security over the following couple of decades is reunification, if I may call it like this, between the United States and the United Europe.
A Western world whole and free, as it were. You mentioned security spending. Of course, Poland is pulling its share, and probably more. You have committed to, I think it's probably doubling defense spending up to what would be a very high level, 4%, I think I've seen.
Which is only possible because we were able to repair our public finances.
But do businesses have to expect to pay higher taxes?
International business is paying their fair share of taxes, but we fight tax havens. The best example of this is how much international businesses paid for the 8 years predecessing our government coming to power. This was the very similar figure, 33 billion zlotys, and after 8 years of our rulings, it was 90 billion, so 3 times more. And this is why we were able to spend so much more on social policy and on defense policy. This came not out of nowhere. This is dependent on public finances, because our budget deficit is on a similar level as it used to be, and our public debt to GDP is falling.
Inflation probably helps a bit too, to bring nominal debt down. Can we do the transatlantic? Can we do the transatlantic relationship first? Because there's a lot of uncertainty about what happens in the US. Donald Trump looks like he will be the Republican candidate in the presidential election next year. How does Poland's role in this as a transatlantic bridge respond if Donald Trump is the next president of the United States?
We are able to cooperate with all with Republicans and with Democrats, but I have to admire the position of President Biden's administration vis-à-vis Ukraine and this crisis which Russia created, invading Ukraine. I admire the position of the administration, but also the position of the American nation. If not the support of the United States, probably there would have not the Ukraine would not be sovereign and independent anymore. So that's very important that we have such an American administration which does appreciate and does understand the intricacies of the policy of this region.
And are you confident that that support will stay? Not just in the US, you've expressed worry about some of the main EU states about whether the support and the understanding of what's at stake in Ukraine will last. How worried should we be?
In the US, yes, I believe that whoever is going to be the next president of the United States, there will be some continuation of the current policy. In Western Europe, I do believe that the shock which happened to some elites in Western Europe will be understood appropriately, and that there will be focus on transatlantic unity, on more spending in defense, on reinventing their operational model, because I said that this one, which was valid for the last couple of decades, is in limbo. So yes, I'm cautiously optimistic that after the initial shock, there will be, this recognizing of the current challenges around us and adopting their policy to those.
It sounds to me like you're saying that maybe some Western European countries haven't quite fully realized how much they actually have to change their models. Is that a fair interpretation?
But they're going in the right direction, so I give them the benefit of the doubt. And
Poland, of course, has earned a lot of credibility with its role throughout the period after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Western Europeans have had to admit that you were right, you and other Central European and Baltic states, in warning about Russia's intentions. Now, you know that your critics will say that the last issue on Ukrainian grain and the import blocks has undermined some of that credibility. So I'd like to ask you first, what's your answer to them? But second, longer term, when you're going to be a friend of Ukraine in its attempt to join the European Union, of course, when they join, I say when, not if, because I hope it's when, not if, they will have full access into the agricultural market. So how do you square that domestic political difficulty with supporting accession?
Well, actually, the tariff-free or almost tariff-free access for lots of Ukrainian goods was introduced in 2014, 2016. It is not the recent phenomenon. The recent phenomenon was that we have prepared solidarity lanes, and those solidarity lanes were supposed to be a kind of route to export Ukrainian grains, crops, wheat, and so on, agriculture products, to Northern Africa and to the Middle East. And something different happened. Most of those grain landed on the Polish market, destabilizing prices on our different agriculture products or sub-markets. And we had to address it somehow, because it was not the initial intention. And wheat and crops were supposed to be exported, and they were not exported. Only 12% of the incoming grains was exported. This is how we reacted in such a way as we reacted, and we immediately entered into discussion with Kiev and with Brussels, and we have worked out together a compromise. A compromise is a definition of a compromise, I suppose, is something which is not good for any party or any side, and nobody is happy with this. But at least we found the middle route, and we are now trying to calm down the agriculture market in Poland. We are trying to empty, to make farmers sell their grain and export their grain, so that their granaries, their grain stores, storage is prepared for the next harvest. That's our jigsaw, and we try to find out the most appropriate solution.
Will you also crack down on any Polish companies that have been selling Ukrainian grain domestically?
There were predominantly Ukrainian, Polish, and representatives of Western European companies which were doing those trades, those imports into Poland.
Can I ask you about China? Because you've been warning also about European policy towards China or some Western European capitals. Ambivalence, maybe. You have warned very clearly that the mistake that was done with becoming dependent on Russia, there's a risk of continuing that mistake vis-à-vis China. So what is your assessment now of the policies that the European Union at Brussels level and many member states are pushing in terms of trying to repatriate both, on the one hand, the chip industry, we are talking about chip wars, and also the industries involved in the green transition. Is the policy the right one? Are we going fast enough? And can Poland benefit from this, or is there a risk of Poland being a bit left behind?
Well, first of all, I do differentiate Russia and China. I do respect China a lot because China so far not only is great superpower, but also behaves in a peaceful way. But I do fear of potential threats coming out of the Far East, and China in particular, but I hope they won't materialize. Russia is a very aggressive country. Russia has actually grasped, Russia has used, is imperial, is nationalistic, is a colonial power, you may say, the worst of the 20th century. And I still believe that China won't be aggressive, so I do differentiate the two. And also I said that for us, I hope for many European leaders, China supporting Russia in war, in their efforts, in Russian efforts to conquer Ukraine would be a Rubicon, would be the red line. And I still hope that this red line is not going to be crossed. So that's about the nowadays. Speaking about the future of China and the challenges which such a dynamic country brings in itself, that's a different story. We cooperate and compete. We cooperate and compete within the European Union. That's not bad. That's good. But we also have to cooperate and compete with China, and we have to be aware that some pieces of the value chains cannot be outsourced. And this is why it's so important that some reshoring or friendshoring, as they call it, happens. And Poland is actually a beneficiary of this. And that's very good for the entire European Union, that we re-establish, recover reinvent ourselves from the point of view of the value chains, the product chains, and so on. And this is also related to COVID, and this has something to do with COVID and with the growing China as such as well.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about Poland's opportunities in this change in industrial structure. But just a very quick follow-up on China policy. Ursula von der Leyen gave a fairly hawkish speech before her trip to China recently, where she sort of, I think it seems to me, ratcheted up the Brussels view, at least, of how cautious we need to be about China, while keeping this three parts of a rival, systemic rival, economic competitor, and partner on some strategic issues. Do you agree with the what seems to be a ratcheting up, a kind of hardening of the position. Is she basically right in your view?
Well, I think that the European Union has to cooperate on our position, working out position towards China. That's first, because each country alone is too small to deal with China. Yes, I would call China a strategic rival. I would call China a strategic competitor, economic competitor. I still believe that China is going to be peaceful and not destabilizing the global order.
And in terms of Poland's opportunities here, in terms of chips, can you say a bit more, or chips and information technology and this whole space where there's especially a push from the US to start to cut China out of some of these supply chains, and an increasing push at the European level too. How does Poland stand to gain from this reshoring or friendshoring?
Well, every week, I myself and many of my colleagues here also in the room speak to many American companies in particular, but also Western European companies about some reshuffling or re-establishing of those value chains. And we present our fortes, our advantages, like very good, we are very good in IT skills, software development, programming, and this type of those type of activities, which are extremely important in the new global revolution, digital revolution. And this is why we are increasingly successful in bringing global superpowers, the biggest digital companies of the world, into Poland, and also creating an ecosystem of cooperation, including our universities and our mid-sized Polish companies, small and mid-sized Polish companies, and learning by doing happens in Poland, and that's a very good process for us.
So it's not just a sort of new version of the 1990s model of tying into German supply chains. It's something more
No,
homegrown
it's much
as
more
well.
than that.
And the other big change in industrial policy in the last few years is, of course, to do with the green transition. And here, as you know, Poland is sometimes seen in Western Europe as a brake on moving forward with the green transition. So can you to finish, can you tell us how you see both the speed and the nature of the green industrial transition? And again, does Poland have opportunities here, or does it mostly pose risks to Poland?
Both risks and opportunities, and we do indicate that the energy transformation has to be just. We don't want to leave poor people behind. Many people feel that if we do this too quickly, it will be at their cost. Poland was completely dependent on coal in 1990s because of the model which was imposed on us by the Soviet Union. So we now invest a lot in renewables. I can give an example. In 2016, solar power installed was 100 megawatts. Now it's 12 gigawatts, so more than 100 times more than it used to be. But we want to have a stable energy source as well, and this is why we are developing the nuclear energy projects as well. Small modular reactors together with GE, Hitachi, but also AP1000 with Westinghouse and with our Korean friends as well. So that's our energy strategy in a nutshell.
And this is, of course, a very ambitious policy. There are people who doubt that this sort of project here or elsewhere, because it's new, can be achieved on time. And of course, it will be a great victory for Poland if and when that does get developed. But basically, to finish on this topic, I think I hear you saying that the green transition doesn't have to be a threat to the Polish economy or the Polish population, but there are maybe some things that need to be done differently. Which are they? How would you improve the European policy on the green transition?
Well, first of all, you might heard me saying I wanted to get rid of the Russian fossil fuels even 2, 3, 4 years ago as quickly as possible. And by building new infrastructure, gas infrastructure and oil infrastructure, we were able to reduce our dependency to zero. That's also something which was beyond imagination just 7 years ago. Now we have implemented new infrastructure projects, and we've done this. With vis-à-vis the European climate policy, the only suggestion which I would say is that one size does not fit all, because we have completely different starting points. Scandinavian countries have lots of hydro, in particular Sweden has lots of hydro energy. France is completely based on nuclear energy. They are very happy already. Southern European countries have lots of sun, and they are also happy with renewables. We have to find our way of going as quickly as possible towards zero emission or close to zero emission economy, but we don't want this to be done at the cost of our society, and in particular poorer part, less wealthy part of our society. And this is why we sometimes have frictions and tensions with the European Commission.
And this is no doubt a conflict that is sort of simmering in other countries too, and I'm sure will come to the fore as other countries realize that there are conflicts there too. Just to finish off, of course, that everybody is kind of looking for this standoff between Poland and the Commission to come to some resolution. You were very close. I just want to ask, how optimistic are you that we will get to some final resolution on the judicial questions and the recovery and resolution money? And once that happens, what is the sort of good news that can follow from that? What are the new collaborative? How can Poland's role then be more contributing to how European policy is steered once that is out of the way?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to, and I still want to sort out this issue of the table, because I think that there is bigger fish to fry. There are much more important issues to deal with. To your first question about how optimistic I am, I'm cautiously optimistic, but now I've done whatever I could do in that respect. The final decision of the Constitutional Court is expected, and I don't know what it's gonna be and when it's gonna be. So I cannot be any more concrete than that. Once it's done, if it's done, I see lots of areas for further cooperation, which is going to be good for Poland and for the United Europe, because the challenges around us are enormous, are of gigantic nature.
And very briefly, what are they? The bigger fish to fry? What are the things you would most like to
Well, in
achieve?
particular, what is going to come out of this situation in Ukraine, that's the biggest one, of course, for our region. Russia threatening not only Ukraine but also other countries, that's another one. Reinventing ourselves, because not only Poland but in particular Germany and other countries have to find new energy sources and new operational model. China, as I said before, spending more on defense spending more on defense, and this goes for all of the countries. Inflation was actually in all countries of Europe, and only Poland and several other countries of Eastern European Union and eastern flank of NATO do increase our spending on defense. So there is some lesson to be learned from this as well. All in all, I do believe that now there's a time when we have to think out of box, new strategic challenges around us, and the schemes of the past do not suit here. We have to find new new solutions for those new challenges.
There will be some very important decisions to be made at NATO in Vilnius, at the European Councils in June and later this year. So we look forward to your contributions there. For now, Prime Minister Morawiecki, thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you, everyone.